Hey everyone, welcome to the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Fisher. Today we have a special guest named Amanda Lauer. Amanda is an author. Before we dive in with Amanda, question of the week: what is your favorite software right now that you subscribe to that's making your life easier, making your business run smoother? What's that one thing right now that you're really appreciative of? Let me know. Give us a shout out on Twitter. My Mitch Fisher on Twitter, and then the Catholicpreneur on Instagram. Let me know. And yeah, let's dive in with Amanda. So I'm really excited about Amanda. We connected on X. She is an avid reader and history buff since childhood. She's an author and a journalist, and she is the author of the award-winning Heaven Intended Civil War series and two time travel novels, Anything But Groovy and Royal and Ancient. Lauer and her husband, John, have been married 42 years. They have 4 grown children, a daughter-in-law, 3 sons-in-law, and 8 precious grandchildren. Without further ado, I'll bring on Amanda Lauer.
Hello.
Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about personal life, and then about just kind of what you do.
Sure. Okay, so I'm Amanda Lauer, and I live in central Wisconsin with my husband of almost 43 years, John. We have 4 grown children, Stephanie, Nicholas, Samantha, and Elizabeth, and each of them are married. 3 live out of state. 1 lives maybe 5 miles from us. And we have 8 precious grandchildren. And yeah, what I do for a living is I write Catholic Christian novels that are sweet love stories, historic love stories.
Amazing. What got you started into writing? How long have you been writing,
Yeah.
and why did you choose to be a writer?
Well, when I first got out of school, I went into the profession of proofreading, which is something I always had a skill for and a knack for. So it was a perfect fit for me. I did that for the first 4 years after my husband and I were married until we had children. Then I took like 15 years off to raise the kids. And when our youngest was in 2nd grade, I went back to proofreading for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, which is a big paper in our state. They had many regional newspapers, so I was proofreading for their regional newspapers. And after proofreading like 10,000 articles, I got the hang of how articles are written. And I threw my name in the hat to start writing articles when people were short, and began to write for all sorts of departments. First, I started with football. So I was covering high school football, which is probably one of the few women doing that in the late 1990s. So it was an adventure. But I went into all sorts of things. I wrote about medical, homes, personal interest stories, all sorts of things. And then after 9/11, the papers were shut down, and I struck out on my own as a freelance journalist and a proofreader. And I always had a desire to write a book. I think almost every journalist does. But what I was looking for is I wanted to write a sweet historic romance, something that my kids and my grandkids could read someday, and I'd be proud to have them read because I love historic romance. And I hadn't ever really been able to find anything that what we would call a clean read or a sweet read. They were bodice rippers, as they called them in the day. And so I wanted to do something that I didn't know if anybody else was doing. And so while I was writing in my career, I was also shooting photographs, and I was taking a picture of a gentleman, and he was telling me that his wife was a writer and she had an agent in New York City. And I was very excited to meet her and talk to her about the whole writing thing. And she ended up challenging me to write a book. And what we did is every month we met, and she was writing a book and I was writing a book, and I would bring a chapter of my book and she'd bring a chapter of her book. And we'd meet at a coffee shop, a local coffee shop. And after 2 years, we each had a book ready to go. And she went her way and got hers published because she writes a different genre than I do. And it took about 2 years to find a publisher, actually, because it's not easy. Anybody knows that who's written a book. It's not easy finding a publisher. Plus, the genre I was writing, not only was it sweet romances, which makes it a little harder to find a publisher, but very much Catholic focused, because that's my background. And so my characters were Catholic too. It's what I knew and what I wrote. And I was very fortunate after 2 years to find a publisher in Ontario, Ellen Hercash. Well, that's her married name, but she she and her husband own Full Quiver Publishing. She's actually from the U.S. but married somebody in Canada, and they offered me a contract for my book, and it took some extensive fixing on my part to get it up to their standards, but they did publish it. So my first book, A World Such as Heaven Intended, is a Civil War romance, but it's based on a true story. So someone from my area, his great-great-uncle's experiences in the Civil War, and I had always told him that what a great story this would be. Someone's got to write this book. I didn't know it was going to be me at the time. And after I had that book, I thought I was done. That was it. My life was complete. I had a book written. And then a week later, people started asking when the sequel was coming out. And I kind of panicked. It took almost 7 years, start to finish, to get the first book out. And I'm like, I'll be 100 by the time I get 5 books out, you know? But I managed to really step up the writing game. And at the time, I was freelancing for 2 newspapers. And for 20 years, I was writing for those papers, and I still did until just this past year I retired to do writing books full time. So my 9th book came out in November. So it's the 5th book in my Heaven Intended Civil War series. And I have 2 time travel books and 2 books that I wrote in collaboration with other Catholic teen book authors. So it's a career now. Who would know,
Wow.
right?
Right. That's amazing. What does your creative process look like when you're sitting down to write? Um, or what does your day-to-day look like when you are like really heads down on a project? How do you get the creative juices flowing, um,
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Well, I have kind of a routine. People call it like the hour of power or something, where I read like the daily scripture, the mass readings. I have various websites I check out and such that have things to do with, starting my day off, right? And then when I get my cup of coffee or tea or whatever I'm going to start the day with, and usually what I do if I'm really intensely working on a book, I have a timer by my desk here, and I set it for 45 minutes, and I just work in 45-minute chunks. That's really all I can handle. And for 45 minutes, I just put my nose to the grindstone, and I just write and write for 45 minutes. And then I take a break. And so I try to do, on a really good day, I can do 4 of those 45-minute chunks. And usually, if things are going well, in 2 45-minute chunks or 90 minutes, I can write 1 chapter of a book, which is about 5 pages, between 1,000 and 1,500 words. But my books also take a lot of research too, so a lot of that time also is devoted to research. When you write historic novels, like my current book I'm working on is set in the court of King Henry VIII, and it's just an amazing amount of things you have to look up. If for a 250-page book, there's about 125 pages of notes that I have,
Mhm.
documented, because I'm really trying to not only convey these beautiful stories, but also it's a learning experience for people when they read my books. They learn about what it's like day to day life, living in a different time frame. And they also learn a lot about the church because, like I said, I'm Catholic. I write from a Catholic perspective. And I find the early church history to be very interesting. Actually, any history of church, whether it's the 1600s or the 1800s or the 1500s, it was different at various times through the centuries. So I think it's very interesting. And I do have priest friends that I consult with to make sure I'm on the right track. They actually have like the Catholic encyclopedia, which I don't have access to, which that helps a lot too.
Definitely. How does your how does your like prayer life, your faith life, your Catholic faith integrate with your work life? I'm sure it's like obviously there's a lot of like your writing is informed by your faith, like you said. How does that look daily, and like how do you find them being intertwined like throughout that creative process?
Yeah. Well, for sure. Like I said, every morning I start off, I read the readings for the Mass. I listen to Form Daily, some other Catholic emails that I get every morning that I read and kind of get myself centered. And once a day, I pray the rosary, whether it's in the middle of the day or in the evening or in the morning or whatever, however it works into my schedule. And part of my creative process too is just some people call themselves plotters, some people call themselves pantsters. So you're either flying by the seat of your pants or you're plotting. I'm not a plotter. So what I do is when I'm in the middle of a book and I'm writing and I need to know what the next chapter is going to involve, when I go to sleep, I always pray to my guardian angel and ask, for him to place the ideas in my head that I need the next morning to start the next chapter. And it works amazingly well. I'm so surprised. A lot of times, sometimes the ideas come to me right when I wake up, or I'm dreaming about them, or I'll be in the shower and it'll come to me. But the ideas always are there. When I sit down and I'm ready to write, I know the direction that I'm going. And throughout the day, if I'm stuck, if you know, the Blessed Mother is my agent. I've got a statue right next to my elbow here. And I'll pray for her intercession if I'm really stuck, or if I need something and I don't know which direction to go or how to move forward. And that's not just writing the books, it's also marketing the books. That's as big of a chore as writing. Now that the books are out, it's just like I feel like I spend 40% of my time just marketing every day. And I'm always looking for creative ways, and I'm looking for the right contests to enter to get your book recognition, the right people to contact. And we're also trying to get several of my books made into movies. And that's a daily process too. People you need to talk to and connect with and follow. And yeah, it keeps me busy full time, that's for sure.
For sure. I love that guardian angel tip. How simple, but like practical and beautiful. Like I think that's something I want to incorporate more is that kind of prayer. You mentioned like
Absolutely.
the marketing of the book. I'm really curious. What does that look like for you? Once a book or project has released, like you're done with it. Take me by step from beginning to now, like what that marketing process looks like.
Yeah. Well, there's the pre-release. So we always know months in advance what day the book is going to be released. And because my editors and publishers are all Catholic, my books are always purposely released on a saint day, a saint's day that has some significance to us. So, like my daughter's saint is Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, is her patron saint. So the last book I had came out on her saint day. Looking for ARC readers, which are people who have some pull in this world. They have lots of followers. They have some sway. Who will read your book in advance and write a nice testimonial about the book that can either go on your website or go on the inside of the book or the cover of the book. Um, my book that came out in October, which was called no, take back. That's his next book. My book, Royal and Ancient, which came out in October. I was lucky enough that Callista Gingrich wrote a beautiful endorsement for the book. So that went on the front cover. It was so nice. But so you work on that, you get those people lined up. Then you start lining up interviews for when the book actually comes out so you can talk about it. And you start doing, they call boilerplates. I think it's like these squares that you put on Instagram that say things about the book, either a pull quote from the book, or it'll be an endorsement somebody wrote, or it'll be some special thing about the book. So you start getting those out on Instagram. You mention on Facebook that what you're doing. I have a newsletter that comes out every other week. So I talk about the progress and things that are going on in the newsletter. I write a blog, ideally once a week. That's not necessarily about the book. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just about daily life. I'm a baby boomer, and so I have my grown children, I have grandchildren, and I have my aging parents that are in my life and expect help from me. So I have lots of different blogs, lots of different subjects. So all those things are happening leading up to and as the book releases. And when the book launches, for the last book that came out, I actually had a public book launch at a bookstore in my town, which many beautiful people came to. It was great. And I set up a lot of book signings. One was at my parish for their, sweet stroll at Christmas time. Because I write Civil War, there's a Civil War reenactment, older home in our area, like from the probably older than that, 1700s. I signed books there like 3 times this year. So I set up all these book signings. And also now that there's a new year, there's the big women's conferences, like the Columbus Catholic Women's Conference is coming up in February, actually. There'll be at least 3,000 women there. And I'll be part of the booth for the Catholic Writers Guild, so I'll be selling books there. There's a really nice conference in Wisconsin called In Mary's Footsteps, with about 500 women, but they bring in national speakers. It's amazing. And that's a wonderful place to meet people and to sell books and talk about my projects and such. So it's just ongoing. You've got Twitter, you've got Instagram, you've got Facebook. And every day I'm trying to just touch a little bit and keep my stuff in front of people so they remember my projects. And then now I'm also in the middle of the next book I'm writing. The book is completely written, but now are the extensive rewrites and fixes and stuff, which will take at least 6 weeks. So I try to kind of weave my days, balancing them with the promotion of the older books, writing the new books, working on projects that are coming up. So it's kind of a balance of what I do.
Definitely. So this book you're editing right now, is that the next book that you will have released?
Yeah. It was actually supposed to be released on September 2nd this coming year, but because my mom and dad are both facing serious health challenges, we have decided just to kind of end the contract, not necessarily forever, but so I don't have a hard deadline, because my days every day are different, whether I have to go to the oncologist with my dad or go to my mom's assisted living center. So I really don't want to have any actually hard deadlines this year because everything's up in the air. But so yeah.
Very cool. What would you tell young Catholic writers who are specifically interested in writing, whether they're journalists right now, or what would you tell them to start doing right now if they want to make a career out of writing?
Well, what I did at first was I built up my portfolio, and a lot of that was by writing for free, by offering to write for, whether it was a website or the diocese or what have you. Build up your portfolio. Reach out, start meeting people. You can go online. If you go on the Catholic Writers Guild, you can join the Catholic Writers Guild, actually, which would be good. And you can start reaching out to writers like myself who are experienced. A lot of us are more than happy to mentor young writers. I never went to school for writing, so otherwise, I can't really say, oh, you should be taking English and you should be taking this and this and this in school, because I didn't go that path. I didn't go the traditional route. Um, Another thing is, if you really do want to write a book, find an accountability partner, because that's literally the only way I believe I ever would have written one book in my life, was with my accountability partner, where we just, traded the chapters every month. And you just had to do it, because I'm one of these people that I don't miss deadlines. I don't, if I have an obligation, I meet it. And so I was obligated to have that chapter done every month. And so I did. And like I said, after 24 months, I had enough for a book, which was kind of crazy and unbelievable.
How do you? I feel like there's kind of an overlap, and you're kind of speaking to a little bit between traditional writing, like book writing, but then also using digital media tools and digital writing to promote those books and things like that. Did you find that like difficult to go from writing a book to then like going on social media, doing a newsletter? Like, how do you code switch, I guess, between those two?
Well, for me, I'm not super techy. So all of this stuff has been a very huge learning curve. Fortunately, I go to a lot of Catholic writing conferences. At least once a year, there's a huge one. Usually it's in Chicago. And there I met a wonderful young Catholic woman who has created my website, created my newsletter. Of course, I'm paying her to do it, but I would rather pay her because she can do
Mm-hmm.
everything in a fraction of the time that I can do it. And so, and because I'm now with Prism Press with one of my books, they're really into promoting the books, and they had like an 8-hour course that I had to take. Well, I was asked to take. I did it gladly, but I'm promoting in social media and what things will get you the biggest bang for the buck. And so I've just been studying and learning and stretching myself and doing hard things. Like even today, I was creating a banner, one of those pull-up banners for my next speaking engagement. I'm like, getting pictures on there, getting a QR code, all this stuff. It's like, well, you know, I'll get through it. I'm learning.
Yeah,
Not my
definitely.
favorite thing. The technical isn't my favorite thing. I'd rather be writing the book or fixing the book. But you just have to do everything in balance. Otherwise, you can write the best book in the world, but if you're not promoting it, no one's going to read it.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so interesting. Just like there's so much more to it than just writing. It sounds
Yeah.
like. I mean, you don't think about all those extra things as someone like I don't write books, but to hear how much goes into it on a day to day basis for you, that's really really neat. What's been like the coolest story that you can share, like from your time as a writer, of just like an encounter you had or something that
Yeah.
happened to you,
Yeah.
or like an unlock moment?
Well, I've had a lot of really neat encounters with fans of mine out in the wild, as we say. Well, I'll give you a current one and one that happened a couple years ago. So I have the book launch for my book at that bookstore in my city in the beginning of December. And I could see a young girl walking with her dad, and they were kind of hanging out at the edge. And finally, I invited them over. I said, "Are you here for the book thing?" And she had like a stack of my books, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'd be so happy if you would sign my books." And then she wanted to buy more, and she just was so excited to meet me. It was just like I can't believe that anybody is that thrilled to meet me. I just feel like a nice normal person, and she was just the sweetest thing. So it was just wonderful. And I had another experience. This was probably oh, maybe 4 years ago or something at the Columbus Catholic Women's Conference. I was with the Catholic Writers Guild at the booth. There were several of us authors there, and there was two women standing in front of the booth, and they were in front of my books. And this one woman was pointing out, she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's the best book. That is like my favorite book I've ever read." And she was pointing to my book. And I said, excuse me, I'm the author of that. And she's like, like, can I have a selfie with you? So I was just like, really happy to do it. And yeah, I've had several of these things. And another really cool experience I had is a gentleman connected with me on Twitter, and he said that I was his daughter's favorite author. I'm like, it was really cool. And it turns out that it was Archduke Edward Habsburg of the Habsburg family, like
Wow.
the ambassador to the Holy See from Hungary. I'm like,
Wow.
oh my gosh! And we had the coolest experience ever because his great great uncle, I believe, is going to be a saint, and they
Oh,
had
cool.
on his feast day. I think it was October 17th, a couple years ago. They were doing a mass for him in Washington D.C. at this beautiful church, and he invited me and my husband to go to this mass, and he was doing a talk afterwards. And so we actually spent the day with him, and I brought him a ton of books, not only mine but other Catholic teen authors. And he brought them all back home. He said I had to bring a whole extra backpack to bring them home. He's got 6 kids and 5 are daughters, so they all seem to like my books, I guess. And it
Wow.
was such a neat day spending time with someone who's just like his family. Oh my gosh, the family history. And the cool thing is, he had a new book come out this year, and his publisher sent it directly to me, and they said they wanted me to actually endorse his book. I'm like,
Oh,
oh
very
my gosh,
cool.
like he knows every major player in the world and in
Yeah.
politics and queens and kings and everything else. Like he wants me to endorse his book. Cool.
Wow. That's really cool. I mean, that's just such a beautiful example of just how just connections and networking can lead to so many opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, what would you give like so I'm not I wouldn't call myself a writer, but I do want to like start to build a writing habit because I know like I feel like writing is just like good no matter who you are.
Hmm.
What advice would you give me to start forming a daily writing habit? Like what should I write about?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is people have journals, even if it's just 15 minutes of writing, not necessarily like a diary, today I had this for breakfast and that or whatever, but just whatever's on your mind at this point in your life. Otherwise, if there is a particular thing you actually want to write about, just like I do, you just set the clock. For you, it may be just 15 minutes, and just write freehand or type or however you're going to do it if it's on the computer about whatever it is that interests you. And what they say is you're just supposed to write and write, write, not do the copy editing.
Mm.
However, since I have 40 years of copywriting and copy editing experience, I can't stop myself. I do edit as I go along, so it takes me longer to write. But for you, if you're just starting out, just pick something that interests you and write about it. And a lot of the things, I love history, so I love to explore all these different topics. But boy, I can go down some rabbit holes some days, and I don't come back up for an hour, just researching and researching. But some of the things I find, I incorporate into the books. It's just such interesting information that I love to learn it. And I think it sounds like my readers enjoy learning it as well. I had one young lady, I believe she was from California. She's probably about 15 or 16, and she sent me like a fan mail, believe it or not, which is the coolest thing. I keep all my little fan mail letters by my desk. And she was saying that she got for Christmas some kind of ruler that was like a dictionary. I'm not really sure how she's describing, but she said there's so many words in your books that I don't know, but I want to learn them. So as I'm going along, I look them up on my little ruler. And I thought, wow, that's super cool. That'd be the kind of thing I would have done. When I'm reading, I remember doing this all the time when I was younger, reading, and I would literally stop and get a real dictionary out and look up words because I wanted to learn. But it's proved to work out well for me because I use lots of cool words in my books now. And even though when I wrote for the papers, we were kind of instructed to write like at an 8th grade reading level. Now when I'm on my own, I can write however. So I'm writing at like a college level, but I just raise the bar, and the kids they'll reach up for it. They actually like to be challenged, which is kind of cool.
Very cool. Tell me a little bit more about your current project. So you're in the editing process, right? And then what's the future of this current one look like?
Okay, so the book is called Lucky and Blessed. I had written the short story for an anthology with Catholic Teen Books. And this is a story that's set in King Henry VIII's court, where a young lady has come to serve at court. Her father was basically killed because he was caught harboring fugitives, but during the time of King Henry VIII, fugitives would be monks and priests. So he was martyred for his faith, and she ends up being asked to work in the court of King Henry VIII, and it's kind of a dicey place to work, as you can imagine. And by this time, he was already on his 5th wife, I believe. And she's actually one of the ladies in waiting for her. And the things that she sees going on in court, and the young man that she meets, and she's trying to help him too. He's actually escaping because it was the dissolution of the monastery. So he was studying in the monastery, and all the monasteries were being destroyed, and all these young men were homeless, basically. And so it's kind of the intrigue, but they fall for each other, but there's conflict, and they each have lies they're telling themselves, things they think will happen if they do this or that, and it's not ever, King Henry does what King Henry wants. But yeah, that story just needs not necessarily rewriting. The editor wants like 10,000 more words, and they want me to delve more richly into the life in the Tudor court. So right now I'm actually reading books from the library set in the Tudor court to kind of get more of a background to help enhance my background, because I need to learn a little more, because this is really the first full-length book I've written in this particular time, place, the setting. So
Awesome. Where can people find you and your books, and just like if they want to stay in touch with what you're doing?
yeah, if you go to amandalauer.com, so that's just my name, AMANDALAUER.com. That's my website. All the books are on there. As a matter of fact, my newest ones were just added today, so I know that by my beautiful helper from the Catholic Writers Guild. And so you can see everything about there. My blogs are all connected to there. If anybody has an interest in learning more about the life of a writer and my life, actually, lots of blogs to read. And they can also sign up for my newsletter on there. So they'll get the newsletter about once every other week and be kept up to date with what I'm reading, what I'm writing, my travels. I might mention one of my grandkids here or there because they're so adorable. I love them all. Don't want to put them on social media, but they're amazing and the best. So, so
Very
that's
cool. Well,
me.
perfect. I will be sure to link all that in the show notes too, so the listeners, you guys can check all that out. Amanda, thank you so much for taking time. It's been so fun to talk to an author, someone who's writing, and just kind of learn from you. So thank you for taking the time, and best of luck on the book that you're currently writing. And
Thank
any
you.
future projects you have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And God bless you and all your endeavors as well.
Thank you so much. God bless and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you.